At 82 years old, Joe Pesci, one of Hollywood's most enigmatic legends, is quietly slipping away from the spotlight. Known for his explosive performances, razor-sharp wit, and unforgettable roles in classics like Goodfellas, Casino, and Home Alone, Pesci spent decades redefining what it meant to be a supporting actor. He didn't just play gangsters, he became them, blurring the line between art and reality with such force that even the greats like De Niro and Scorsese marveled at his brilliance. But now, the man who brought so much noise to the screen is choosing silence. No farewell tour, no final film announcement, no red carpet interviews, just a quiet retreat. And the reason? It's more heartbreaking than fans could have imagined. While some assumed he was simply tired of Hollywood politics or wanted peace in old age, the truth goes far deeper, rooted in grief, fading health, and an industry that never truly understood the private man behind the violent roles. As Joe Pesci distances himself from the only world he's ever known, those who loved his work are left wondering what finally pushed him to say goodbye. In this emotional deep-dive documentary, we explore the real story behind Joe Pesci's disappearance from the limelight. His struggles with fame, the haunting loss of close friends, and the sobering reality of age catching up to a legend who once burned brighter than anyone else. Stick with us as we uncover the truth behind Pesci's heartbreaking exit from the stage. He once ruled. Joe Pesci's journey to Hollywood wasn't paved with red carpets or grand studio contracts. It was forged in smoky nightclubs, rough neighborhoods, and a relentless desire to prove he belonged. Born in Newark, New Jersey, and raised in Belleville, Pesci was never the typical Hollywood dreamer. He was a barber by trade, a musician by passion, and a performer by instinct. He started as a lounge singer, even played guitar for Joey D and the Starlighters, long before he ever stood in front of a movie camera. But fate had other plans. His big break came not through connections or family ties, but through raw talent and an unshakable friendship with Robert De Niro. That connection led Martin Scorsese to cast him in Raging Bull in 1980, a performance that earned Pesci his first Academy Award nomination and proved that this quiet man from New Jersey had a fire inside him, unlike anything cinema had seen. What followed was a string of unforgettable performances, each one louder, bolder, and more haunting than the last. From the terrifying Tommy DeVito in Goodfellas, which won him an Oscar, to the cool and calculated Nicky Santoro in Casino, Pesci didn't just play criminals, he made them human, even when they were monsters. Yet behind the scenes, Pesci was never fully comfortable in the spotlight. Fame didn't excite him. In fact, it unnerved him. He rarely gave interviews, avoided Hollywood events, and retreated to a quiet life in New Jersey whenever filming wrapped. Unlike many actors who crave recognition, Pesci found it exhausting. He once said, "I'm not looking to be the biggest guy out there. I just want to do the work and then go home." That mentality made him rare in an industry obsessed with image. But it also made his eventual withdrawal from acting feel inevitable. After a few flops in the early 2000s, Pesci quietly stepped away, leaving fans wondering whether they'd ever see him again. For nearly a decade, Joe Pesci disappeared from film entirely. No new roles, no cameos, nothing. He became the ghost of Hollywood, a name whispered with reverence but never seen. People speculated wildly. Was he sick? Retired? Burned out? The truth was more complex. Pesci had grown tired, not just physically but emotionally. The roles that made him famous were also the roles that drained him. Playing violent, unpredictable characters took a toll on his mental health. And in the absence of true, meaningful scripts, Pesci saw no point in continuing just for the sake of relevance. Friends close to him revealed that he often spoke of wanting to live a quiet, spiritual life, free of cameras, noise, and the chaos of Los Angeles. But it wasn't just career fatigue that led him towards silence. The loss of close friends hit him hard. When Frank Vincent, his longtime co-star and friend, passed away in 2017, Pesci reportedly fell into deep reflection. They had shared the screen multiple times, building unforgettable chemistry through their shared Italian-American roots and gritty upbringing. Losing Frank was like losing a piece of his past, and it marked a turning point. That same year, when offered a role in Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, Pesci initially said no, over 50 times. It took months of persuasion from De Niro and Scorsese to convince him to return. And even then, His performance in The Irishman was markedly different, quieter, more restrained, filled with subtle heartbreak. It wasn't just a role, it was a farewell letter. Now, at 82, Pesci's silence speaks louder than any line he ever delivered on screen. He isn't seeking applause, he's seeking peace. And for fans who adored his fire and fury, it's bittersweet to watch the curtain fall. But the man who once screamed his way into our memories has earned the right to whisper his way out. For someone who dominated the screen with such fiery intensity, Joe Pesci's exit from Hollywood has been remarkably quiet, almost hauntingly so. In a business where actors cling to their fame long after the spotlight dims, Pesci is doing the opposite. He's letting it go, intentionally fading into the shadows. There was no grand announcement, no dramatic farewell press conference, no social media post filled with nostalgia or self-congratulation. Instead, it has been a slow, deliberate retreat, a man stepping away from the noise he never wanted in the first place. But behind that retreat is a deeper truth. At 82, Pesci is not just saying goodbye to Hollywood. He's confronting something far more personal, his own mortality. According to close friends and rare reports from sources close to the actor, Pesci's health has been quietly declining over the past few years. It's not just age. There are whispers of chronic pain, fatigue, and the toll decades of emotionally demanding performances have taken on his body and mind. For a man who built his career on playing characters who lived fast and died young, Pesci seems determined to age on his own terms, with dignity, privacy, and peace. Those who've worked closely with him describe a man who never really trusted the Hollywood machine. To Pesci, the industry was always a business first, a place that could love you one day and forget you the next. And he wasn't wrong. After his Oscar win for Goodfellas, Pesci could have written his own ticket. But instead of chasing leading roles or blockbuster fame, he chose selectivity. He turned down more scripts than he accepted, refused to be typecast, and frequently walked away from deals if they didn't feel authentic. It was this stubborn integrity that kept his legacy untarnished, but it also made him an outsider in an industry that rewards compliance. And now, in his twilight years, that same independence is guiding his exit. Pesci isn't interested in sympathy tours or legacy documentaries. He doesn't want tributes or lifetime achievement awards. He just wants to live quietly, away from the noise. His decision to retire more or less for good after The Irishman in 2019 wasn't made on a whim. That film, a haunting meditation on aging, regret, and death, was symbolic in more ways than fans realized. In the role of Russell Bufalino, Pesci portrayed a man whose silence was more terrifying than any scream, an older, wiser version of the hot-headed gangsters he once played. His performance was chilling because it felt personal. It was the first time we saw Joe Pesci play a character that reflected where he was in life, measured, tired, and aware that the end is near. Critics praised his performance as a career best, but Pesci didn't bask in the praise. He slipped back into solitude, never publicly discussing the film in depth. It was as if he had said everything he needed to say through that character, and now there was nothing left. Friends say he spends most of his time now in New Jersey or at his beach house in La Valette, far from Hollywood's glare. He plays guitar, reads, occasionally golfs, and rarely talks about movies. He's become somewhat of a neighborhood legend. People see him around town, quiet and unassuming, often alone. And yet, those brief glimpses speak volumes. They tell the story of a man who lived his dream, paid the price for it, and is now finally giving himself permission to let it all go. What's most heartbreaking about Joe Pesci's goodbye isn't that he's gone from our screens. It's that we didn't get to say goodbye with him. There was no standing ovation, no emotional send-off, just silence, and maybe that's how he wanted it. For a man who made noise his trademark, his final act is one of profound quiet, a reminder that even the loudest voices eventually go still. To understand the sadness behind Joe Pesci's quiet goodbye, you have to look past the fame, the films, and the fiery characters he played. Beneath it all was a man carrying decades of emotional weight, some from his roles, others from personal loss and unhealed wounds. Pesci may have become famous for playing violent, explosive men, but those roles were often emotionally draining. He once confessed in a rare interview that embodying those intense characters left a residue that was hard to shake. After filming Casino, for instance, he admitted he needed time to decompress because living inside the mind of a sociopath like Nicky Santoro was mentally exhausting. Over the years, those roles piled up, each one digging a little deeper into his psyche, each one demanding more of his emotional reserves. And while audiences cheered his performances, few realized what it cost him personally. Pesci. But it wasn't only the roles that haunted him. Life off-screen dealt its share of heavy blows. One of the most painful chapters was the collapse of his marriage to Claudia Harrow, a relationship that turned bitter and ultimately tragic. Harrow was later convicted of attempted murder for hire against her second husband, and the case, though unrelated to Pesci directly, drew massive media attention. The scandal dragged his name into headlines he never wanted to be part of. Pesci, who had always valued his privacy, was suddenly caught in a whirlwind of tabloid frenzy. It left him deeply disillusioned with the media, and he became even more reclusive afterward. That trauma didn't just damage his view of fame, it damaged his trust in people. Friends said he became more withdrawn, more guarded, more hesitant to open his world to anyone beyond his small inner circle. Then came the loss of his peers, people who had shaped his life and career. Frank Vincent's death in 2017 hit him especially hard. They weren't just co-stars. They were brothers in a shared cinematic legacy. Their chemistry on screen, from Raging Bull to Goodfellas, came from years of friendship and mutual respect. Losing Frank felt like losing a part of his own story. The deaths of other friends and collaborators, like Ray Liotta and even comedian Don Rickles, whom Pesci admired deeply, began to chip away at his once fiery spirit. Each passing reminded him of time slipping away. In private, those who knew him well say Pesci began speaking more often about life, regret, and unfinished business, topics he'd rarely touched on before. That shift in perspective marked the beginning of his emotional retreat from public life. What makes Pesci's story especially tragic is how misunderstood he's always been. Fans saw the tough guy, the wisecracking mobster, the scene stealer with a short fuse. But they didn't see the man who loved music, who played jazz guitar with the soul of someone who understood pain, who once released an entire album of love songs under a pseudonym just to keep it separate from his acting fame. That quiet, artistic side of Pesci was often overshadowed by the violence of his roles. And while those performances earned him accolades, they also boxed him in, making it harder for him to be seen as anything other than the angry Italian-American archetype Hollywood kept offering him. Over time, the lack of creative freedom made acting feel more like a prison than a passion. Now, with the past looming large in his rearview mirror, Pesci is choosing solitude over spotlight. Not because he hates acting, but because the emotional toll of his journey has finally caught up to him. He has nothing left to prove, no one left to impress. The tragedy is not that Joe Pesci is gone from our screens. It's that he carried so much pain behind the scenes for so long, and so few ever knew. There's something undeniably poetic about the way Joe Pesci is choosing to bow out, not with a bang, but with a whisper. At 82, he's leaving behind one of the most electrifying legacies in film history, yet he's doing it without fanfare. No career retrospective tour, no emotional Oscar speech, no last cameo to tie it all together, just silence. And in that silence lies a message that is both powerful and heartbreaking. Joe Pesci is saying goodbye on his own terms. After decades of playing men who were constantly at war with the world, loud, angry, unpredictable men, it's almost ironic that his final act is one of quiet defiance. He's stepping away not because the roles stopped coming, but because the world he once thrived in no longer reflects who he is. Hollywood changed. The industry became louder, flashier, more invasive, and for someone like Pesci, who always prized authenticity and privacy, that shift was too much. Fame was never the goal. Peace was. In many ways, this is a man reclaiming his identity after a lifetime of pretending to be someone else. For years, Joe Pesci became what Hollywood needed him to be, the mobster, the comic relief, the dangerous sidekick. And while he did it better than anyone, the cost was steep. Fame, especially the kind that Pesci earned, isn't just a blessing, it's a burden. It isolates you. It turns strangers into critics and makes every private moment feel public. In recent years, Pesci has reportedly grown tired of being recognized. Tired of being asked to repeat lines from Goodfellas or pose for selfies he never wanted to take. He wants to be Joe again, not Tommy. Not Nicky, not Leo Getz, just Joe. And so, he's slowly retreating from everything that blurred the lines between who he is and who the world thinks he should be. Those close to him say he spends more time now focused on reflection than creation. He's deeply spiritual, often revisiting the Catholic values instilled in him as a child. He meditates, he prays, and he's found peace in simplicity. He gardens. He listens to Sinatra. He strums his guitar in the early morning hours, not for an audience, but for himself. These aren't the habits of a man desperate for one last role. These are the rhythms of someone who has finally found freedom in being forgotten, at least by the industry. And maybe that's the most tragic part of it all. That a talent so rare, so electric, could walk away without the world fully realizing what it's losing. But perhaps that's exactly the way Pesci wanted it. He's never chased applause. He never needed validation. His work spoke for itself, and now he's letting that work be his legacy. And so, at 82, Joe Pesci's goodbye isn't just sad, it's profound. It's the end of an era, the final chapter of a man who never asked for fame, but earned greatness anyway. His absence leaves a void, one that no actor, no matter how talented, can truly fill. Because Joe Pesci wasn't just a performer, he was a force. A firecracker on screen, a mystery of it. And now, as he fades into the quiet life he's always yearned for, we're left with his body of work, etched forever in cinematic history. From the rage of Tommy DeVito to the wisdom of Russell Bufalino, his performances remain immortal, even as the man behind them chooses to disappear. He may never take another bow, never step in front of the camera again, but his influence echoes through every frame he ever touched. And while it hurts to let him go, maybe the most we can do now is respect his choice and say goodbye in the same way he did. Quietly.